your coffee?
I do. I do.
Okay. I wonder how many people remembered.
Did you mention it
I
at all?
didn't put a reminder.
Well, there, we'll see how many people remembered.
Andre Adams will be
Debbie
here.
Hill told me today she was looking forward to it. So she
Linda
remembered.
will be here.
There'll be a few.
Yep.
Maybe there won't be anybody. Oh, there's 3.
All right.
Say hi to us so we know who's there.
Lindoggle. We said
There we
Lindoggle.
go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure Audrey Adams will be not too far
Tuning
behind.
in, pretty
Unless she's
soon.
doing a Christmas. Oh,
There
there
she
she is. Look, our 2 faithfuls.
We've got a few more people.
We
than
do,
that.
but like.
Hi, Carol and Sherry.
Bonnie.
Okay, I see Sherry's name. So I'm just going to give everybody a little update. Suzanne's granddaughter, she's had a stroke.
Oh, my word.
Yes. And so that's probably maybe what caused the fall. I don't know. Anyway, she's had a stroke. She's going for surgery. And they're going to take a bone or something from her. I'm not going to give you details because I might say something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She's going for surgery, and we'll keep you updated. I know. So let's say some prayers. All the prayer warriors out there, start praying for Suzanne's granddaughter. She's 5 years old. Yep. Okay. Hi, Susan. Hi, Glenda. Hi, Sandra.
Okay.
Okay, so we are here. How many's left?
Okay, so this week is the applique week. Then so I guess you guys need to tell me, next week we can do the big border block. It would be a fairly long video if we do the big border block and the layout. Or we break it into 2 weeks.
Probably 2 weeks.
Because the layout thing, I want to talk about and lay it out and show some things. So maybe we'll just talk about the borders and the border blocks and stuff next week. The good news is border fabric that people had ordered came in.
Yeah, we've filled a lot of orders.
So those orders are going out or being picked up or whatever. So that's a good thing. Yep. And I want to give a shout out to Marilyn Hargreaves because bless her heart, she finds all my mistakes. And there's always some.
She finds my mistakes too. Hey, don't feel bad.
So, if any of you guys had trouble with the simple filler block last week, it's because I put to cut the wrong amount. The sizes were correct. But if you went by the picture, you were fine. But if you went by what I had typed out, you weren't. So I did put an update on the post on the Quilt Project page. So if you check it there, there's an update.
Yes.
So I really appreciate her keeping me on track because I've got,
Well,
I don't always proofread quite as much as I should, and I make stupid mistakes. So,
well, that's not really stupid.
anyway.
But anyway. Okay.
So we're going to get started.
I want to put a bug in everybody's ear too about what we've been asked to do.
Oh, yes, okay. Do it.
Do it. You
Do it.
We've been asked to do a block of the month program. So it would
like we did last year.
Yeah, it would be over and above our sew-alongs. It would be something that we would mail out. We haven't got it picked
It would be like the Chatsworth was run last year, right?
And somebody wanted another one like that. I'm not saying any names, Debbie Hill.
Nothing is sacred here.
But there's others that have approached me too. They want a block of the month program. So we're going to do some brainstorming, come up with a block of the month program. We're going to start out, if you want to make the deposit to join, that will be your last 2 blocks of the sew-along.
The last 2 months. The charge for the last 2 months would be the deposit up front. So then when you get to those last 2 blocks,
they would be paid. Yeah. So, that's what we're doing. We're doing some brainstorming, trying to come up with something. The downside of just going to buy a block of the month to do, the block of the month patterns are so expensive. So we're going to do some research.
So why don't you guys do some, give us some feedback on that too, because true block of the months
are 40 to 50 bucks just
they
for
are
the pattern.
just for the pattern. Like they're not cheap.
Yeah. So that's where That's what we're trying to come up with something that isn't so crazy expensive.
But that being said, it does get broken up into monthly payments, which makes it a little bit easier to swallow because it's a little amount each month coming out instead of one big quilt kit.
Elaine said she'd like to get in the packet every month. So you're not the only one, Elaine. We've had a lot of people contact.
So we're going to do some research, but if anybody has any ideas or any styles or anything that they want to say, send a message and just put a bug in our ear so that gives us a place to start looking.
Start the message with says, "Hi, Twyla."
Do that. And we'll see what we can do. Okay. Perfect. Okay, now can we go on? Do you have anything else to share?
Well, I do really, but I won't. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay.
We will talk about retreats another time.
Right. There she goes. And now here comes all the questions, right? There will be something coming out very shortly about the retreat. So just stay tuned for that.
Yes.
Okay. So we are doing the applique, but like I mentioned before, you don't have to do applique. And before this is over, I'm going to give you some ideas for some things that you could substitute if you didn't want to do applique. So you have a choice if you do decide to do applique to do it. I did the Lori Holt method, which I know when I mentioned that in other weeks, there were people who were saying in the chat, what's the Lori Holt method? Well, we're going to go over that tonight. I have to admit, I have never done fusible applique. Like raw edge, and that's all Deb does. So she's going to go over just some basics about the technique for that and what you need for supplies for that. So if you are one that you want to do that route, you can, or if you want to try the Lori Holt, I can tell you if you've never done the Lori Holt method, this one would be a good one to start on because there's not a lot of tricky pieces. Like they're very basic round circles and things that turn, and you don't have a lot of problem with the shaping.
So you know those sheets that you said, the Lori Holt sheets that come in the package? How many of those sheets would each person need to do this?
Well, they'd only need,
like
I don't
one
even
sheet?
know. Oh no, they'd need more than one.
Okay.
For sure, yeah.
Because they don't have a lot of packages, and it would make it more cost efficient if I could open a package and sell people like 2 or 3 sheets.
Right.
If you could tell me how many sheets roughly they would need.
Okay, so I'll do some calculating tonight because those sheets, if I remember correctly, the ones she's talking about, she has 2 size sheets, but she's talking about the 14 by 14s. So like those,
it would make
like
it cheaper.
But you'd be able to maybe get some of these out of it. Like I'm thinking you might be good with just like 3 or 2. Like So I'll do some calculating and see what because I have some of those at home, so I can lay some of the blocks out and see. Okay. So just to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about it. So the Lori Holt method, what is different is that it uses a sew-in interfacing, which you can either get in, like, it comes in like a roll that's 18 by 36 or something like that, or the ones,
Talk. I don't
Sing.
You're making me nervous. What do I say? What am I saying?
Oh, yeah, make you nervous. Like, what did you do with those sheets? They were in here.
They're in there.
Here.
Turn the light on.
Yes.
See them?
Oh.
Oh, you come out and talk, and I'll go get them.
Yeah, but where?
I don't know. Maybe Stacy took them.
Well, they're not there. I thought they'd be up there with the other stuff. Anyway, they come in sheets. This is what this looks like. This is the rolls I'm talking about.
Okay, you show the rolls, and I'm gonna go get
Okay, this is like the rolls that when you unroll it, you have like, this is just a piece I cut off of one at home. Or there's 14 by 14 sheets, just square sheets. She made those specifically for certain patterns because it was just the size you needed. So when you do this, you have to use a template of some kind to draw your shape on there. But because it's a sew-in interfacing, when you draw your shape on, you have to leave at least 1/4 inch all the way around where you draw it, because that's going to be your seam allowance. So don't like place your template. If this is your template, don't start and say, oh, I'm going to save on my and put it right up there in the corner because you wouldn't have your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to show you. Deb's going to take this down. That's not it.
I know, but can it be used?
No.
I don't know.
They're here somewhere because I saw them just last week.
Yeah, but somebody might bought them.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, so Deb's going to take this out because I really need her to be...
I'm going to take that out.
Yes, you're going to take that out. Yeah, she's going to take that out. So, I want you to focus down here. So when you, and I don't have a pencil, and of course Deb probably doesn't have a pencil here. I prefer to draw on this with pencil. But what I'm getting at is if you're using a template, when you put it down, don't put it right to the edge, because when you cut this out, you need a seam allowance, a 1/4 inch seam allowance around it. So between these two, I would need at least a 1/2 inch there to allow for my seam allowance, and at least a 1/4 inch there. So that's your first tip, is that you would have to have that so that when you cut it out, where's my scissors hiding? I had my good scissors here, but they seem to have disappeared. There.
Those are the ones.
So when you cut it out, you've still got your seam allowance. See, and between these two, you've still got your seam allowance. So you always have to make sure you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance around. So that's your first thing about drawing your shapes on. Then we're going to talk about each block, and we're in detail, but I also want to show you a little bit about how you shape them. So once you, there we go. Once you draw your shape, you're going to place it on a piece of fabric. So say we were doing a circle that was half one color and half the other out of this. You want your fabric right side up, and I always call the interfacing, the side that you've drawn on, the right side, because you want to be able to see it, right? So that's the right side. So both things have to be right side up. Never start with your fabric down. Always start with your fabric right side up and this right side up. In the case of circles, which will come in handy for these particular blocks, it's always a good idea if you make a mark for your center. So just fold it in half, line up. You can very easily see, I don't know if Deb can pick that up, but you can easily see where those two are matching. Make a crease, and then just make a little mark with your pen or your paper, because if you want it to center that on there so that it was exactly halfway, you need something for a reference. So that little point would go on your seam on each side. So that's just like a trick to get things centered before you sew. You then take it to your machine, whatever your shape is, and you sew right on the line the whole way around. It's better if you shorten your stitch length. The bigger your stitch length, if your stitches are big and you're going around a circle, you get more notches. Like you don't have a smooth...
Bumps. You get bumps in your curve.
You do. Yeah. So you want to have a shorter stitch length. You don't have to reverse or whatever, but when I get back to where I started, I usually just overstitch a few stitches right on top of where I started, just to anchor it. Then, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors. This doesn't have to be exact because you're no longer sewing with a 1/4 inch like for piecing where it has to be so accurate. You just don't want your block to come apart. So you're just going to trim around this, roughly a 1/4 inch seam allowance the whole way around. So just like that. Then you're going to take and you're going to pull your interfacing away from your fabric. Make a little slit in your interfacing, and then just make a couple little cuts. Do not cut right out to your stitching. So in a circle like this, I might just do three cuts, or you could do 4.
What length is your stitch that you use?
I go short. Mine is probably like a 1.5 or a 1.3, something like that.
Okay.
So then you're just going to put your fingers in there and you're going to turn this. So this is why I like this particular type of applique, because there's no raw edges. So once you get this turned and shaped and stitched down, there's no raw edges. So that doesn't look as neat as it should, because we're then going to take something like the point turner. I'll tell you what else works wonderful. If you have the
Tupperware
old-fashioned Tupperware orange peeler thing, that works. That's what I used until I found out about these things. So when you put this in here to shape, you always put it, so can you see that there's...
Lynn said, do not clip around your edges.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a minute. You only, well, since you asked, we'll get to it now. On outer curves, you never have to clip. You only have to clip on an inner curve. So on a circle, that's considered an outer curve.
Okay.
Right? So if you have points, I'm going to show you some points or something there in a minute, how you trim down the points. But any of these that we're doing here in these particular blocks, they do not have inner. So what I mean by inner, for anybody who doesn't know, I don't know if I can think of something.
Marilyn uses the purple thing.
Right, that would work.
Yeah.
Say you were doing a duck. I can't even draw a duck. Say you were doing a duck. This is an outer curve. You wouldn't have to clip, but do you see how this is an inner curve? So this, when you got ready, you'd have to clip your seam allowance. Otherwise, it wouldn't lay flat when you turned it. So an outer curve, you don't, but one that dips in, you have to. And I'll show you the points there in a minute. So this, if you take whatever utensil you're using, you can see that there's fabric in like your seam allowance there. Does that show? You don't want to have your point turner just on the interfacing. You want it underneath the seam on your fabric.
Because otherwise you're going to poke a hole through.
You probably are. And then you're just going to take it and you're just going to push it out gently. And as you push, crease it with your thumb and your finger as you go behind there, because fabric has a memory. That's why it gets creases, right? Like when you sit on it or whatever, it wrinkles, right? Fabric has a memory. So as you're smoothing it out a bit, give it a press with your thumb and your finger. And then when you're all done shaping, you're going to take it to the iron and just give it a little. So the one thing about this particular type of applique is it's not as exact. This is more of a primitive, rustic feel. So if you've got tiny pieces that are very intricate and tons of points and have to be really particular, you want to go with the raw edge fusible, right? So then you're just going to take your iron that seemed to have gone missing and just give it a little press. And after you give it a little press, if there's any places that...
I was watching you. I forgot to turn the camera over there. It's okay.
Did that help you guys watch her watching me? So when you get it done, if there's some flat spots that you don't like, take your tool, gently press on the fabric and push it out a bit and press it with your fingers. And you'll get it more rounded any place that it's a bit flat. So the other thing I find is as you're sewing your curve, don't have a bunch of, like when you're sewing on your curve, don't do a whole bunch in stitches in a straight line and then turn and do a whole bunch in a straight line and turn. Because if you do that, you're going to have points everywhere you do that. So you're going to try to consistently try to get a nice rounded, yeah, with your stitches. So basically that is all there is to it. But I am going to show you that on a piece. So this is a different shaped piece and I've got it sewn, but I want to show you that there's points down in here. So when it comes to those, you can do as much as you can pushing this out with this. But when you get right to the end, make that bulk of all those seams that's in there work for you. And sort of push on the bulk of the seam to make it as pointy as you can. But like I said, because it's got seam allowance jammed down in that point, it is not going to get as pointy as it would if you were using fusible. So the other thing I'm going to show you is that when you get to the end of this and sewing, I had trimmed, here's your seam allowance. You can see that I trimmed a little bit there and a little bit there. Just don't go too short because then when you start poking out, you may poke through. But trim a little bit of that bulk out of there before you turn it. That's all you got to do. The other thing that works really good if you have a tinier one, these ones that we're using, you'll be able to probably do with just something like this or the purple thing. A pair of these work wonderful. When you've got a sharp point that you can't get into, you can close that, get down in there, grab the fabric, and pull it out. I did not steal those. They're mine. We always carried those in our pockets.
At work?
Yes.
I know. So did I.
Always. I've got that and a bigger pair. So that's as easy as it is. It really is not rocket science, but it does take practice, and it gets better the more you do. But no, it's not as exact. If you are a person that you're going to want your shapes to be absolutely perfect, then you're probably better off going with fusible raw edge. But if you like that primitive look, go with this. So now we're going to talk about the individual blocks. And I just messed up Deb's little thing. She's got rid of here.
Do you want me to show my applique before we go into the other
Yes, you can, because then we'll talk about each block and what you're going to need.
Okay.
Okay. So give me the camera and you go do your thing.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a few options. Where's my options? I feel like you've moved me. Where's my...
No. Here's your fabric.
Yeah, but I'm looking for my piece of this. Right here.
Okay.
So there's a few options. This is, it's called Hot Fix. And you can also use Steam a Seam, or you can use Wonder Under. All of them do the same thing. The downfalls with the different brands, I find that Steam a Seam gums up my needle more.
Okay.
I find Wonder Under is thinner, so your product isn't quite so stiff. Nice thing about Hot Fix is that technically you don't have to top stitch it. That's what the directions say. That's what it's promoted as. But if I was to put it in a quilt, I would top stitch it.
I would too.
Yeah, definitely. But it's actually nicer to work with. The back comes off easier, and it's easy to work with. I like it. But it is out of the 3 products, it does make your flowers stiffer than the other 2 products.
Oh, really? Okay.
So that's your choice. Mm-hmm. So there's 3 options.
So do you use a special needle? Because there's
I
chrome
don't.
needles and stuff that supposedly don't gum up as much.
Yeah,
and...
I've tried a lot of needles, and I
Okay.
don't see a lot of difference in them, to be honest. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, if I was going to do a flower, those are your scissors, so I won't cut.
Yeah, you can cut.
Oh, did you? I would cut a square, and I would iron it in place.
Now, there's 2 sides to this stuff.
Yes, there is. So, so if you go like this, you can tear it apart and you can see and feel it. But this is the smooth side, like a wax paper feel. But if you very carefully, you can probably get in and see it. You want the glue part away from your iron. See how this looks? This is actually stretchy, and you'll know that that's the glue.
Right.
Okay? So you know that's the glue
that's
side.
Waxier is
The part that you iron on.
and the part you draw on.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I would take this and I would iron it in place. So don't just think that that's good enough. You have to iron it with enough heat that the glue becomes opaque. Is it opaque?
Or transparent or something, or opaque. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what they said when they were showing us in Texas, remember? So I would actually give it a good iron. If it's not ironed well, it's not going to come off well, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to get raw edges on your fabric. What are you holding your mouth for?
No, I'm good. Okay. So, probably 90% of the time, you're going to put your fabric.
My Wonder Under on my fabric. Is that what you're wondering?
Yes. Before, you're not going to draw it and cut it out.
You can draw it if you want, and you can do that. I find it's easier to do this. If I wanted to if this was Wonder Under, I could go draw all my shapes on it and then cut them off and put them on there. But you have to leave that 1/4 inch around your drawings so that when you cut, you're actually cutting on the line of the flower or the circle, right?
Right.
I find it's just as easy to do it this way and draw it on.
Okay.
So if I was to draw, I can just draw a flower.
So typically you'd have a template or something that you're tracing around.
Yes,
here
yeah,
for
and I'm
most
just,
patterns. She's just freehanding it.
Yeah, don't look at my flower. And then I'm going to take it and I am going to just cut around it, right on the line.
So that's different than the method I do, because you don't cut on the line.
Right.
You stitch on the line and then you have to allow for your seam allowance and cut.
Yeah. So I cut that right here. There's my flower.
Okay.
So I like to just tear it like this, and I find that it loosens it really well to tear it off. If that doesn't tear off smoothly, then you're going to have rough edges along your fabric. So if you're starting to tear that off and it kind of doesn't look like it's coming off easy, put it back down.
Slap it with the iron again.
And slap it with the iron again.
Okay.
You need it to be, that was fine. I'm just showing you that you can put the iron on it again now. And
so if somebody was to have trouble getting their paper off or finding the edge, is there a way to make that any easier?
if you can't twist it like I twist it.
It's here. It's here. It was here. Did you move it?
Oh, Lord. Welcome back, Twyla.
I'll find it. It'll be in my foot. We had a straight pin already, but...
So I find when you iron this, if you lay it on your skin, it pulls the heat out really quickly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're like me, I don't like to stand there and wait for it to cool off. It's best to wait for it to cool off before you try to take the paper off. Just lay it on your skin anywhere, and it draws the heat out really quick. Some people like to score it and just take a pin, straight pin.
Oh, look at that.
And you can pour it that way.
Nice.
Okay.
Very nice.
See all my papers coming off quite easily. It doesn't have to come off all in one, but you see how nice and smooth my edges are? It works. One thing I have to say with the fusible is that you're working in reverse. So I want to show you something. If I was to make the letter B, just trace a B and cut out my B. The nice thing with fusible, you can make really tiny pieces very accurately.
Very accurate. You may need to take like a littler pair of scissors. There's nice little
Yeah.
sharp, the Karen Buckley, the little ones
Yeah,
are
the
perfect.
nice little green ones.
Yeah.
So when you take this
Off and
paper
iron it.
off, and you're going to go put it on another piece of fabric to applique it to, right? Well, that's not really good because it's upside down. It would be reversed. So when you're tracing out your shape, like if you had, let me see, if you had a leaf and you wanted the leaf to go to the right, and to take that off, your leaf is now going to the left. So lay your template on upside down
When you draw it
when
on.
you draw it on.
So if it's anything directional that you need it to
go a certain
that
direction.
it can't just go any which way.
Right.
Okay.
Put your template on upside down. But everything you're doing is circles, and so they're not
Yeah.
going to have any of that trouble. I just wanted to make sure
Right.
they knew it was coming in reverse.
Right.
Just so you know.
Wendy Muse says she patched holes in her slippers with the
Hot
material
Fix?
and Hot Fix, and it worked well.
It works. I mended my pants, that hole in my pants with Hot Fix, what, probably a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
And it's still on my pants.
And you didn't sew it. You did it specifically with the ironing to see if what they said
if it would
was.
come off. Now the edges are a little bit frayed now, but it's been over a year.
And you've washed them a lot.
I know. So if I was to take and iron it again, I think it would fuse it again, but I just haven't been bothered to do that.
Right.
Anyway, so that's
Okay,
that method. I'm going to let
good.
you do your thing. Do you want me to put it back in the stand?
No, you're going to need to
Okay.
do your. There's the pin. Or is that the one you just took it? Oh, no, look, there they are. They're both there. I won't have one in my foot. Nice. Okay, so we're going to start. Block 1 is this one. Okay? These poor blocks are getting rattier and rattier, being drug all over the place. So, this is basically 2 pieces, long strips of fabric sewn together. First, your background, right? Mm-hmm. And I always start with my background piece a bit bigger than what it needs to be. So if this one is going to be...
I do that with the fused edge too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Because sometimes by the time you're done appliquing,
yeah,
it has pulled it in a bit. And especially if it's the first time you've appliqued, because the more you applique, you kind of get how to hold your hand so it doesn't draw the fabric in under as it's... Yeah.
It's best to have that extra and then be able to trim it down.
It is, and square it up after you're done. So this block is supposed to be 6 by 13 and a half. So I would make sure that when I cut these longer strips that I made those probably an inch longer and probably at least half an inch or an inch wider before I sewed them together. Mm-hmm. So then you're going to take and you're going to sew little pieces together because we're doing the reverse, right? So somewhere. Okay. So, these, but I used them for that thing.
That's all right.
So you're going to take and you're going to sew a couple pieces together like this and put your circle on it. And that's your background circle. And then you're going to do a smaller set to cut your inner circle and then flip it so that they're reversed. So yes, you can use templates. I used these, but for those of you who don't have them, because I have a lot of Lori Holt things, so that was that.
What's your diameter on that?
So, where's my? I need a ruler. No, right here. So that one is about a 3.5, and this one is about a 2. But what I want to show you is you don't need anything special. Ta-da! Find something, like as long as you have enough room around the edge of your block for your seam allowance when you sew it in, because you wouldn't want your seam allowance touching right on this. You want a little bit, just use your judgment. It doesn't have to be the same size as mine. You know, if yours is a little bit bigger, you've got some wiggle room there, right? So find something and use that as your circle. For your big circle, use this for your little circle. I made this inner one a little bit bigger than these 2 outer ones because I like that look.
I see that.
But you could do them all the same. Or you could do 3 different sizes. You could do a bigger, a medium, and a small across.
That would be cute too.
That would be cute too. So you can find things in your cupboard, a pill bottle, the cover on a vitamin bottle, anything like that will work for some of these. You don't need special templates. So this one is really easy. I used 2 colors, the low volume and a solid color. The one thing I will tell you is that once you make this circle and this circle, I would applique this to that bigger circle before I put it on here and applique.
Okay.
Just because it's less layers to go through, right? So why frig with it? Do applique your smaller circle inside before you bring it over and applique.
But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. It will go through.
It will. Yeah, it will. But I just typically do that. And you're going to say, some people say, do you cut any of this out? Like after, I never do. And in a lot of the Lori Holt quilts, there's layers, like when there's flowers with petals
kind of
and
dimension
centers.
too.
It does. And that's the other thing you'll find with this method is if you like that textured look, like the different levels in it, you'll get this more than you will with a fusible technique or whatever. So the other thing, this block isn't so bad. It's very easy to lay out and figure out. But one of the things I typically do is when I cut out my background fabric out of a big piece of fabric. So say this is my background fabric. This isn't interfacing right now. And say I need we're going to finish with a 6.5 inch square. I actually draw my 6.5 inch square on the right side of my fabric lightly in pencil. Because then you've got the edges marked so that when you're laying out a detailed block, you can tell exactly, oh, I'm getting too close to the edge of that. I'm not going to have enough room for my seam allowance.
Say that again. So you trace your 1/4 inch all the way around your block.
No, I draw the size of the block that I'm going to trim it to. I don't trim it to that now.
Oh.
So say if we wanted a 6.5 inch square block is what we're going to square it up to at the end after we're all done appliquing, and say we started with a 7.5 inch square, I actually draw my 6.5 inch square on the right side of my fabric lightly with pencil, because even if it shrinks a little bit with the applique, you have got, it's not going to shrink more than your seam allowance.
Mm-hmm.
So that pencil mark is going to be in, because you've got 1/2 inch there, right? That's going to get taken up. So I find that helps me place in a more detailed block to know how to center it or how to put it. But you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You can lay a ruler on top of it after you lay them out and test how you're going to lay it out or whatever. But I do that because I just find it gives me some landmarks for laying out my piece. Does that make sense to everybody, what I just explained, or do I need to?
I think it.
Okay.
I was only half listening the first time. That's why I had asked you again.
I know. I'm used to it.
I thought there might be somebody else out there
I'm
only half
used
listening
to
to
it.
you.
Okay, so that's that one. The next one is the...
Yes, Karen Buckley does have a nice set of perfect circles.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, she does.
Okay.
They're not cheap, though.
Okay, so the next one is the... I will never get home with all my stuff. I'll have that string everywhere.
Yes,
Is what I'm calling the Comet block. So this one, I don't want you to panic about how this background fabric is. You can do that however you want. If your piece, like where I put the green, if yours goes at a different angle, it doesn't matter. If you want to put yours going straight up and down, if you want it to go corner to corner,
Or if you want to do a solid square.
if you want to do a solid square, it doesn't matter. The one thing I will show you is that when you're doing it, unless you're going to take really big pieces of fabric, if you're trying to get away with scraps or using the most efficient use of your fabric, because this is going to end up on a bit of an angle, if you sew this right to there, you may not get it quite on if you're using the smallest amount. So you can get away with smaller pieces if you angle it, right? Because then, right? Or you could have a stiffer
That's like when
angle.
you cut a Lone Star.
Right. So that's up to you. But I would start with, I put measurements in there, what I would start with, sew it together, and then decide how you want to cut out. You know what your size is, and just lay a ruler on there and see, okay, how do I want my stripe to go, right? Like, do whatever you want, or don't put a stripe. It's really not, it's not rocket science. None of these have to be done exact. So again, this one is 2 strips of fabric sewn together before you mark out your template on it, or before you stitch it on your template. And I just took and put 2 lines. So pretend this is my interfacing. I just drew 2 lines about the width that I wanted, right? And then all you got to do is find something with a bit of a curve to put at the end, right? And draw whatever side. So that's not quite as nice a curve as these. So find something the right size. This one's a little small, but you could probably make it work. Just find something the right size to make your curve.
Pleasing to what you want.
Yes, yeah. The other thing is it wouldn't have to be a curve. If you want to put that to a point, right? You could draw it so that your 2 long pieces are like this with your 2 colors, right? Your solid color here, and you could do it that way. You could do one of them going like that, with the other one down here
That would be cute.
going like that, right? Like, you don't have to do, just use your imagination, do whatever you want. And again, that was just, I think this one, I think I used the cap off of a Tylenol bottle, I think. So it's very easy. Like, you're just going to make do with whatever you've got in your house, right?
Yeah. Wendy said, or it could be ends of ribbons, and which is what you just drew out, really.
Yes.
Whatever you
yeah,
want.
whatever you want. You could do anything like that. The one thing, all of these, like it tells you the size, and we're going to go over at the end some ideas of things you could do for blocks if you didn't want to applique. So we'll talk about that at the end. The next one is the Eye of the Storm.
It's a pretty storm.
Well, don't make fun. I told you
I'm
the
not
next time you're going to come up with the names, baby. So this one is done. Your very first step is sewing this and this together, very similar to this, right? Only different width fabrics, right? Whoops. This is what you start with.
Yep.
And then find whatever size. So this worked. See? Find something that's roughly the size that you want. So then, this is just another one of the plain circles, like whatever size, one of these. So to make this, because this is something you may not have lying around the house, I'm going to show you an easy way to do that. Whatever you used for your circle to make this, draw it on your interfacing. And then pick a point, mark it, take a ruler and measure roughly 4.5 inches from here to where it crosses this line and make a dot.
4.5 inches.
Then go from here over another 4.5 inches and make your dot. Then take your thing that you used to make your circle, and where your 2 dots are, do this and do that.
Do it. Draw the next one too.
Well, this one I didn't measure, so it may not
might
look
not be the
even.
same.
I just judged it, but
Yeah.
you'd have to measure it and do that. Then you've got these that you've got to add your seam allowance, right? So you couldn't cut those, you couldn't draw those just like that. You'd have to, after you drew this one, you've got one drawn, then go over here and do a 4.5 or something. I just wanted to show you that that's what made it. Go over here and do it because you wouldn't have your 1/2 inch here,
right,
to allow for your seam allowance. And there's your templates to put on your, okay? So that's easy enough to do, right? So you just use the same thing.
And if you want to do it 4 inches or 5 inches, or
Right, whatever
you
size you want. And if you want this block bigger or
just
smaller,
randomly picked 4.5. So whatever. You
I
want to
did.
do.
I just, yeah. So it doesn't have to be exact. You guys can make it your own, right? That one's easy peasy. I kind of liked.
I like that one. That's my favorite.
I think it's my favorite too. This one, again, you're just going to take. Find something that gives you roughly the size there that you want. So, this dinner plate, the bigger size, gave me the curve, roughly, that I wanted. And then it was just a matter of drawing a straight line, right? So just find something in your house that gives you that curve. When you lay them out, after you make your shapes and shape them, when you lay them out, make a space between them. Just use your ruler to judge your space and then offset them a little bit because I like that look, or don't offset them, even them up, do whatever you want. And then put your circle. But they're all very, very easy to do. Very simple. And all of the directions have the size that the block is supposed to be. So once you get your background piece cut, that helps you decide how to lay it out, right? Like where you're going to center it. This one, you start by making a block first. So, buy a block.
It is a pretty dish, isn't it, Wendy?
Where's my block? There it is. Nope. Really? They're stuck together. There we go. So this one, you start by making a square block like that.
Okay.
And then, once you have this made, then you lay your round circle on it with your template, like in stitch.
Well, that was easy then.
Yeah, so that's easy, and the measurements are there. And please, Marilyn, if my measurements are off, feel free to let me know so I can fix them. So that one, it's 2.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that one measures 8.5 by 16.5, the background piece. That's what you're going to square it up to when you're all done. When you're all done appliquing, and because I find even when you applique, you get this stuff going on because you're rolling it up and working it around your machine and whatnot. Square it up. 2 8.5. So if you didn't want to do applique, you could do 2 8.5-inch blocks and just connect them, right? To get your 8.5 by 16.5. Any 8.5-inch block you like. You could use some that's already been used in the quilt and do more of them. You could do, look at this little simple block. This isn't 8.5, but you could make it. Look at this. How simple is that to do for a filler block if you didn't want to? And you could make that any size you wanted. So if you take off this row, there's your 8.5-inch square. If you take off this bottom row, because there's one of these that is 6.5 by something, there's your 6.5, and you just put as many rows
How
as
big
you
are those
need.
squares?
Those are 2.5-inch squares, right? So most of these, you could do some variation of that. And that is as easy as it gets right there, right?
It's cute though. I like that it's offset.
It is. Like, it's very simple. It uses up some of your scraps. You could do it in reverse. You could do colored blocks out here and put this in background, right? You could do something as simple as this with half square triangles. Like, all of these are half square triangles. Every one of them.
Somebody made little blocks out of their leftovers.
Was it Virginia?
I can't remember.
Or Sandra Gregg? Virginia?
I don't think it was Virginia.
I think maybe it was. Anyway, I don't know. So these are half square triangles. And this is a half square triangle, but then it's just got a little corner square down on this end.
Snowball.
A snowball down on that end after
Did you
make your
ever
half
use that
square.
block somewhere in the quilt?
No.
Oh.
This is just an example of, so you could make something like this for the 8.5-inch ones if you wanted to do 2 of them to put together there. For the ones that are supposed to be 8.5 by 10.5, you could make one of this and just put a little strip down each side to finish it up, to make it big enough, right? The 8.5 by, I'm just trying to think, there was one here that would work really good for flying geese. The 8.5 by 10.5-inch size blocks, if you didn't want to applique. If you use 2.5 by 4.5-inch flying geese, you would need 5 down for your 10.5-inch side, and you would need 2 rows of those. So you could do a row of 5 going, pointing one direction, and a row of 5 pointing the other direction to give you your 8.5 by 10.5. So there's all kinds of things. You could do a simple half square triangle block. We did that already as a filler block, but instead do bigger blocks this time, like make them 4.5-inch blocks instead of 2.5-inch blocks.
And there's all kinds of free 8.5-inch block patterns online.
But they're not all 8.5-inch. Some are weird shapes, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's tons of things you could do. Like this one is 6 by 13.5. So that's kind of a weird size. You may have to just do like strips or do another string block, you know, where we did the strips of the strings or whatever. Because anything that's kind of an off size, because it's 6, it isn't 6.5, right? It's kind of a weird size. You may have to do something like that. But any of these other ones, it's so easy to do. Just anything, like any of the blocks that we already did, you can replace. But come up with some things. But I thought this was simple and cute.
It is.
And I thought these were sweet, and that would work for so many different sizes. So anyway, flying geese are always great. A strip of flying, that's what you could do for this one. Look, where is it? This one. You could do a 4.5-inch strip of flying geese that go 4.5 inch with just a plain piece on top and bottom to give you your 6 inches, right?
Yeah.
Just going across. You could do anything like that. So those are your applique blocks. Is that clear as mud?
Everybody thinks it's clear. It's perfect.
You're right. I'm just trying to think if I hit anything.
Somebody said it was very clear, so that's fine. They
Okay.
get it.
Very good. I don't think I had anything else written down. So next week we're going to do
The layout.
the big So if you remember correctly, there are 3 borders in this quilt. The first border is a narrow 2.5 inch plain.
I think somebody said, the messages above, I think somebody said, can we do the layout so we can decide if we want to put that next border?
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
We'll do the layout next week.
And then they can
Okay.
decide. That
And
might
then-
help them
because-
decide.
Because that layout, once you get it done, if you just want to finish it with a 2.5 inch border, gives you a nice
Nice
generous. No, it gives you a generous throw.
Oh.
It is. Let me see. My mind is so bad.
I do
can't
a
remember.
blanket stitch, and I make it 2.5 in 2.5
That's what else I was going to
long,
show. Uh-huh.
and I do it as close as pleasing to my eye.
I've got something here to show too, but we're going to talk
cool.
about the size of it. I forgot about that. The top is 48 by 56
Without the border.
without the first border. So when you put whatever size border you put, if you just put a 2.5 inch border, it's 52 by 60, which is a nice throw. Or you could put a 6 inch border to make it a bit bigger throw.
Yeah.
So we will do the layout next week, and then the next week we'll talk about the
Right.
border option.
So somebody's wondering how you attach your applique to your fabric.
Okay,
So
so
it's a good thing.
it is a good thing. I
We
don't
almost
know
forgot
whether this is going to show or not. I'm hoping it will. So, I've got a couple different things here.
If you keep it on the thing, it's easier for me to
Okay.
for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I have tried different things. I have tried color coordinated thread. I have tried contrasting thread. I have tried just like a cream or a white. I have done
Black.
invisible. I've done black.
Black makes it a real country look, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I can tell you probably my favorite is when I coordinate with, but a lot of people don't like that.
Because you have to keep
Because
switching.
you have to keep switching.
Especially if you're doing like a bouquet of flowers or something.
Right,
that's
but
got a
I
lot of
do that
color.
on all my Lori Holt ones. I match the colors. Your bobbin never has to change, right? You can always use just a cream bobbin or whatever.
Do you use a thinner thread on your bobbin? I do.
I do pre-filled bobbins,
Yeah.
so they
So there
are
are
a
60
thinner.
weight
Yeah, they
instead
are
of a
60
40.
because I do not wind bobbins unless I absolutely have to. So I also experimented on, because some people like a zigzag, some people like a blanket stitch, some people even with this Lori Holt method, you can even do a straight stitch because there's no
getting
raw
close to it.
edge. So let's go to the red because the red shows. This is your straight stitch right there. So you could do a straight stitch because there's no raw edge. So you don't have to catch down over the edge of that, right? This is a blanket stitch that is what I prefer, but I prefer it in this size right here.
Do you?
Yep, I
Yeah,
like
I like the bigger stitch.
Yep. And
Everybody's
I've
got a different-
experimented. Everybody's got their, I like the smaller. But the one thing I wanted to show you is that when you use a blanket stitch, if you run up too far on your fabric, you get this look. It
Yeah.
shows.
And I don't like that look.
No. Or if you run too far out on the other side, you see how you can see your loop out on your background? So you have, that's one thing with a blanket stitch is you have to be a little bit more careful that that outer straight stitch
If
is
my
falling.
needle goes down and follows right along there, like right
Yeah.
on the edge, you always
Yeah.
get it right on. Just watch your needle.
Yeah.
Don't watch the stitch.
But it may take you a little bit at first
Yeah.
when you first try it. Zigzag, so this is the zigzag, and I'm just showing you in the red. That's a small zigzag. You could use a much bigger zigzag with bigger legs sticking out and in.
Anything to just hold it in place.
Anything at all.
I have pre-wounds here and there, glide pre-wounds. 60 weight is what we use, and they fit most machines.
So this is a matching thread with the fabric. This is contrasting, like picks up the red that's in it, and this is like a cream.
I like the one. And Lynn likes to use a decorative stitch, so you can do that
You
too.
can. You
Yeah.
can. You can use a decorative stitch. You can do whatever you want. Really. It's I started with zigzag and then decided I didn't like it. I like the blanket stitch
Yeah.
better. And I don't like a wide blanket stitch. I like a little
tiny.
one. But
Yeah.
that's just me. Everybody does their own thing and likes different things.
Okay, so is that it for today?
I think. So we're gonna do the layout next week.
That's gonna be, so we'll have that table cleared off. Will it fit on that table, or we'll do
Yeah,
it?
what did I say it was? 48? Isn't
Okay.
that 40? That's 4 feet across.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll be able to lay it
We'll
out
be
on
able
the
to lay
table.
it out on the table because I want to show you a few options. I think there's a way everybody can change up their layout enough that nobody's two quilts could be the same, even though they've done the same blocks, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it can be totally different, or it can all be laid out the same. So it'll be fun. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. If you find any mistakes, let me know, because then I can go in and correct it after I post. So I'll get things posted once I get home tonight.
Yes. Somebody asked some questions. Let's go check that out. What time is the sale? Oh, the sale tomorrow is 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock tomorrow. I get the interview at 2 o'clock mixed up with the sale, and I have to actually think it out. We're looking for some people to do some interviews, Peggy. If you'd like to be on the interview list, let us know. What is that? Is what makes the world good. We should appreciate exactly. Everybody has differences for sure. I read 3 books over Christmas, so no sewing. I'm far behind.
It's not a race.
No.
It's nice that you slowed down and read some books and
took some you time.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yep.
Very nice.
Okay.
Happy New Year's, Wendy.
Yes. Okay, that's
Okay.
it
Good
for
night,
today.
everybody.
Bye-bye.